in Peru, which is right near the border. So so it's potentially possible. It's possible that Taushiro and Guarani have some relationship because those are small enough that it might have not been noticed.
And there are historical texts that say that the Alcides were attacked by Caucheros and pushed upriver.
Okay.
And so we've got ethno-historical data saying that.
Okay.
So that could be also.
Okay. Yeah. So we saw some constructions involving clusters. I just wanted to show them to you. And now I want to talk about compensation. So how did varieties compensate for, okay, this is one issue. So in Peru, you have T for different subject and SPA for same subject, very systematically. That's pretty strong through the whole Peruvian domain, except I think in Quechua 1 you might have R, but in Quechua 2 it's very strong, this T business. Now T is gone from all sources, so there's no source in Ecuador at all that ever mentions this from T. So, however, that left a gap because they did have a switch reference system where you wanted to make a distinction between same subject subordinates and different subjects. You're following me on that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, is that clear? Same subject, different subject. Okay, so how did they fill that gap? Now, the most common gap is this P. So they took the agentive and then they added the locative, and then they just made this new form P, which then replaced T, and they mix a little bit the same. So that's one possibility.
Which would be the agentive plus the locative, you said.
The agentive, yeah, the agentive plus the locative, right. Another thing that could have happened is that E is the loc. So this is one possibility for the Sky business, that this is not the agentive, but in this case the past normalizer plus a locative. That's one possible interpretation of how to interpret this Sky that you find sometimes. Salmon pastasa, this is the variety that Landerman studied, simply has SPA without a subject, without a person marking for same subject, and SPA with a person marking for different subjects. So they've just taken SPA with a person marking. And the Limon-Kochner data in this German text give about 1/3 of the piece as being same subject. So it's this form, but now replace it. So it's actually merging the systems, actually blending, because T in 1/3 of the cases is fully same subject. It's as if they didn't care so much about this compensation anymore. So another place that we might want compensation would be, so in Peru we have very clear distinction all through Peru between PAG for benefactive and PA for genitive. Already in northern Peru this PA form is gone. So in fact we have only PAG, and all the data for Ecuador show PAG and nothing else. Now, it's a bit embarrassing because you want genitive and benefactive to be slightly different. So one way to do it, and this is the Andi family and Arajuno.
Here also.
Huh?
Tena also. I mean, here.
Tena, which will do pachta, so it's a warmi pachta, then sisata randin. And then in Luisa will say warmi raigu, sisata randin. So these are two possibilities, and I'd be very interested to see what other possibilities there are to create a new benefactor. In Peru, so in Peru normalizations can carry person marking. So you can have mihuita munani, or I want to eat, and you can have, sorry, this kind of started jumping around a while. And then you have mihunanta munani, for I want her or him to eat. So you have mihur, and then na, and then a third person marking, and then accused, and then munani. Now that in most Ecuadorian varieties, but not in pastasa, is nuta, is nun is gone in normalizations. We don't find it. So how do people then compensate for the difference between same subject and different subject? Now, this is what they do in northern Ecuador. This is a work by Adler and then one of the students, Martina Brau. In fact, no, I mean, this structure is noticed by Peter Cole, for instance. So, Mikundapa in Randirkani, I bought it to eat, and then Mikuchung Randirkani, I bought it for him or her to eat. So, we use the word chung as a way to replace the same subject in Kappa.
So this lower one is where it's Ecuadorian, but
It's northern Ecuador.
probably here too. Maybe.
No, it's not. It's not here. Not for Luisa case. So she would have Mikunara. Well, we'll have to see. But for the Munai structure, she doesn't have it. So she has Rinara Munarani or something like that. Rinata Munarani. So the formal source is the Horaclave, right? So Mikuchung, let him eat. But this is a main clause. This is not a subordinate clause. So how does it get from main to subordinate? Now, this is where barbacoan becomes interesting, because in barbacoan you can say, I bought it to eat, where chu is used same subject, and then sa is used different subjects. I bought it to eat, same subject kind of factor. I have it so my wife can listen to it, or you have sa with a different subject. So it's very intriguing to see that in northern Ecuador, this Tafiti, the barbacoan influence might have been the source for this distinction. The trouble is, nobody has really seen how far south that goes. Whether, in fact, we still have to do a bit of checking here, but I'm pretty sure that it's not here, but I'm not sure like that Aswai, clearly non-barbacoan territory would have it, so it's a bit weird if this chun business that we see here, that we saw in this example, actually spread that far south. It would go against the idea that we want substrate to be local and to create differences between varieties rather than to be pan-Ecuadorian. Okay, now this is just something I was discussing with Janice in the break. One thing which strikes me is that if you come from Peru, a lot of the very subtle and also expressive content of verbs is expressed with these slightly large, what are called derivational suffixes, like ikacha, pari. So there's a whole bunch of suffixes which are in the middle of the verb and which express way of movement, back and forth, trying to but not quite reaching, all these things. And since most of those are gone, or they're almost all gone, one thing that you could think of is that possibly, in addition to idiophones coming in through other languages because they're in the area, but also that idiophones kind of contributed to the making up some of the expressive loss that, was there, since so much of Quechua morphology was gone in the lowlands and also in, well, the trouble is that you would also expect a lot of idiophones in the highlands, which you don't. So in that sense, it's a bit of a complicated story, unless you could say, well, the languages which were in this area were the ones which contributed to idiophones, but that would require more specific ideas about which idiophones or which other languages in the area are the rich idiophonic languages. So that's a nice topic for a paper or a master's thesis or something. Any questions so far? Remarks? So what I've done is I've kind of given you a kind of an overview of complex verb structures and how they might have been influenced by languages in the area, and kind of showing that there's a rich possibility there for different languages contributing.
So Peter,
Yeah.
so I see you're going to be talking about populace here, but do you notice? I'm sure the Highland varieties are using this Spanish form e to join clauses together.
Yeah.
A lot. Lowland people seem to. Would you consider that to be a compensatory feature? That's
Well,
another thing that Highland dialects do that I haven't seen that much of in the lowlands is this indi suffix.
oh,
Mindi.
or maybe, yeah.
Meaning to join.
You don't have any
We don't really
We do
have
have
that.
it in Tana a little bit more, maybe.
Not much down here though.
It is a little bit in this German source. A few
Okay.
I mean,
cases.
I think it might be less in Bovanasa than here.
Yeah,
It's
it's definitely not very common.
Okay.
Yeah.
The e-business, well, the trouble with, okay, all over the Hispanic American world, languages have borrowed specific conjunctions from Spanish, like pero, y, como. There's a few like that which have been borrowed from Arizona to Chile. You find those forms in indigenous language. One way to explain it would be indeed that these languages did not have conjunctive forms or something like that. I'm not so sure that that's true because they do have tag and other kind of ways of marking relations between clause parts or clauses through suffixes. So my feeling about those Hispanic, almost universal Hispanic borrowings of those conjunctions is that it's also a prestige thing. So this is actually Jane Hill has argued that for Mexico, that in fact it is a way of kind of making a kind of a more fancy version of their own language, introducing these conjunctions.
Here in Tana, with adults who are fluent speakers, there's really very, very little use, if any, of pero or e or como.
Excellent.
And if people use it, they laugh at you or tell you to switch to Spanish, but it's
Okay.
definitely not used
good.
much.
Okay,
in
yeah,
Tana.
yeah. Well, and it's good, it's interesting to see that, so that hasn't happened so much here. I fear for the language
In the future, yeah.
in the future.
Yeah.
Because in the Highlands, I mean, most of the corpora will have a lot of E and pero and things like that in it. As well, and Aymara corpus as well. Yeah, So I want to talk a bit about the copula because it's really an interesting feature here. This ani mani business. I wrote a paper about that actually, not so much focusing on the lowlands, although the story also applies to the lowlands. And I start with a bit of media lengua. So media lengua is a variety of mixed Quechua, which was spoken and is spoken in different parts of the Highlands, where the particular feature of it is that you will kind of replace the roots, everything which is the first part of the word in Quechua, so mana and yacha will be replaced by no and sabi, but nichu will remain. So mana yacha nichu becomes no sabi nichu. So notice that the sabi form has to be regularized because in Spanish it would be se, so you would have no se becoming no sabi nichu. So sabi is a more general form of the verb which is used instead of the verb form yacha. We have it with ku, so kuya, just give it to me, becomes daya. We have it with Maimuzingi, which is very Salcedo Quechua, Maimuzingi, where you're going, Kundimu Ingi. Undi is from
Oh,
my
undi.
form. Undi becomes my becomes undi, and ri becomes I. Undi mo ingi. So the verb I, which is a weird verb, of course, because it's only a one vowel, is the verb ir replacing ri. So we could spend the whole afternoon on media lengua and why it's there, and I don't want to do that so much. What to point out is that ga is not replaced. So takunga mi rikugang sa sinuda ganang. Takunga is rich, more so gaining or winning from sasero. So you have the da there, but there is an inflected, because Ghana is then it's kind of like an inflected form of Yanji. Now the interesting thing is that Ga does not get relaxified, so it's in my corpus of all the tokens, 87% of the tokens were Spanish on the root level. Of the remaining 13%, 12% was the copula Ga. So it's really the glaring exception to the relaxification rule. So why does Ga not get relaxified? Now, why Ga rather than some other form? One possibility is that it's a functional category, and functional categories do not get, but negators and question words do get relaxified, become no, and in my becomes undi, not relaxified because lexical parties said and start have irregular paradigms, but saber becomes sabi, dar becomes da, here becomes I. So that explanation, if you can make I, why couldn't you make a copula which would be sufficiently general? Not relaxified because of monosyllabic root, but hu becomes da and zi becomes I. So three obvious reasons why ga does not get relaxified are not there. And I had to think of something else. And what I thought about was that in fact ga is not a root anymore, but a clitic. So that in the variety of Quechua that gave rise to media language, it's a clitic rather than a root from the perspective of the Quechua lexicon. So it's not a verb in a true sense anymore as a root, but it has almost become a clitic. Now, and clitics on the whole are not relaxified. They just remain what they are. So it has changed status. Now, so that brought me to the question, can we find evidence that ka has changed status?